They say a man's life changes in a single decision. For me, it was the night my daughter-in-law walked away under a sky that had no business watching. 8 years ago, Rachel Carter parked her car in my driveway, stepped out with nothing but a hurried excuse, and left 2 little boys asleep on my couch. She said she'd be back in 4 hours. 4 hours became a night. That night stretched into months. Months into years. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Daniel and Noah were only 8 and 5 back then. My grandsons, my son's boys. And suddenly, they were mine. I didn't sign up for it, but I didn't hesitate either. A promise made to my son on his hospital bed, I'll keep them safe, became the only thing that mattered. Rachel vanished into the haze of grief, liquor, and shadows. And I carried the weight she dropped. Now, 8 years later, she came back. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garage with a wrench in my hand, knuckles scraped from an old corn cleaner. Out here, 3 miles past town, strangers don't just arrive. So when I heard tires on gravel, I looked out the dusty window. A red sedan rolled up. Heat shimmered off its hood. Dust hung in the air, like a question nobody wanted to answer. She got out, thinner, sharper. An expensive blazer, dark circles under her eyes, and the kind of smile you practice in a mirror before saying something you don't believe. Rachel Carter. The same woman who left my grandsons and never looked back. I stepped out of the garage, boots crunching on gravel. The wrench wasn't a weapon, just punctuation. I stood between her and the front door, because that's where I belong in this world. Between trouble and the people I love. Rachel, I said. She pasted on a smile. Edward, you look well. What do you want? I asked flatly. My children, she'd rehearsed those words. You could hear the capital letters in them. For 8 years, Daniel and Noah had filled this farm with baseball caps, watercolors, laughter, and chores. They weren't hers anymore, not because I stole them, but because love is proven in the 2 a.m. hours no one claps for. You lost that right, I told her. The night you put the accelerator where your spine should have been. She flinched, but covered it quick. I was sick. Grief is an illness. I needed time, 8 years' worth. The wind shifted. Somewhere a crow squawked at a fence post. Rachel glanced at the windows of the house as though Daniel and Noah might be pressed against the glass, watching. I'm better now, she said, and I want my sons back. My grip on the wrench tightened until my knuckles went white. You need to leave my property. Her smile returned, colder this time. We'll see. She turned, walked back to the car, and left a trail of dust and menace behind her. I stood there long enough to pray and curse in the same breath. Inside, I put the kettle on. Coffee, grocery store cheap, steadying my hands. On the fridge hung a photo of my late son Matthew. Cancer took him a decade ago. He never got the chance to be the father I became by default. Rachel once sat in his chair, drowning in grief. I remembered the smell of cheap wine, the night she tried to stumble upstairs to wake the boys. I remembered Daniel and Noah clutching each other halfway down the staircase, watching their mother unravel. That's what she wanted to erase with a smile and 2 words. My children. But I had the receipts. I had the memories, and I had something she didn't know I'd kept. An old envelope, folded and worn, written in her own hand the night she left. A letter that began, Edward, I can't be the mother they deserve. Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't. 8 years later, that truth was going to matter, but I didn't know yet how ugly it would get. I never meant to turn this farmhouse into a fortress. It just happened one chore at a time. In the years after Rachel drove away, the house learned our names again. The mornings learned our footsteps. The kitchen learned what it meant to catch 3 people when the world got slippery. If you've ever raised boys, you know the truth. Love doesn't look like speeches. It looks like sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Cleats by the door you've told them 100 times to use. And a light left on at the end of a bad day. I measured those years in measurements that don't show up on a calendar. The height marks on the pantry trim. The number of times I said helmet before the bike left the porch. The way Daniel's voice dropped one summer, like it tripped on a stair and came up older. The way Noah learned to sharpen a pencil so it didn't break on the first idea. There's a photograph on the mantel of the three of us the first winter, taken by our neighbor Alma. My eyes look too bright, like a man bracing for a wave he can't see yet, and the boys are in the wool caps she knit for them. Daniel's cap is pulled low, the brim a red promise. Noah's sits crooked, because some things just won't be told how to behave. Behind us, the cedar trees lean toward the house like they're listening. People think survival is dramatic. It isn't. It's a routine you build so well it looks invisible. Breakfast at 6:30, lunch is packed by 7:00, bus at 7:15 if the driver's in a mood. On Sundays, church for Alma and pies for us if she floods the kitchen with mercy. On Mondays, I'd sit at the kitchen table after drop-off and fill a yellow pad with a list so long it asked for 2 coffees. Fence, oil change, Mrs. Carter's rooster, which was not my business but refused to learn boundaries. Call the school about the field day volunteer sheet, and pick up another pack of Epsom salts because Daniel's legs found new lengths faster than mine could keep up. I kept records the way a man does when he's poor in money and rich in evidence. I saved attendance slips and team schedules, and the receipt for Noah's inhaler. The winter he caught every cough that walked past the house. I stored immunization cards in the same envelope as the repaired birth certificates and the crumpled program from Matthew's funeral. I kept the letter from Rachel, her hand, her slant, the ink of a morning that would never stop needing to be true, inside my church jacket, which I wore to school concerts and parent conferences because I had the sense that a man should show up looking like he takes the room seriously. The boys grew around me the way ivy finds a trellis. Daniel got shoulders the summer he discovered he could throw a curveball. Overnight, he learned the geometry of hate to love. Ice baths, long toss, the wrist snap that makes a ball talk back. He'd practice against the old hay barn until the dust rose and my eyes stung, and I blamed it on the dust. When he smiled, God help me, he looked like Matthew at 14. A laugh that started in his chest and took the room with it. He taught Noah how to spit sunflower seeds without getting scolded. By Alma, and pretended he didn't like it when I kissed the top of his head on my way to fix the porch rail again. Noah found color like he was discovering a language. The first time he drew the farmhouse, he made the sky so blue your heart hurt. He drew 3 stick figures in the yard and wrote our names above them in careful print. Edward, Daniel, Noah. He didn't leave room for anyone else. I said nothing and kept the paper where important things live, under a magnet shaped like a ceramic chicken that refuses to look you in the eye. We fought about screens like families do. We fought about chores and what counted as swept and why laundry hampers aren't for decoration. We made a rule about dinner at the table, even if it was stupid simple. Meatloaf on Mondays, because a man should have one thing he can make without a recipe. Spaghetti on Tuesdays, because the sauce forgives you even when people don't. We voted on Friday movie night and learned that action always beats poetry if the week has been cruel. If you're listening for confession, here it is. I was tired in the way a good back tells the truth. There were nights I fell asleep in the chair with a legal pad on my chest and a pencil in my hand, like I could write the future tidier if I gave it one more sentence. There were mornings I looked at the yard and saw not grass, but a list of chores shaped like blades. I did not have a secret stash of saintliness in the pantry. I had coffee too late in the day, and a prayer I said while pretending to find my keys, but we were steady. And if you're my age, you know that steadiness beats clever every time. The town did what towns do when it likes you enough to forgive your rough edges. Alma kept the boys when I had to take the truck in. Officer Barnes gave me a side look when I double-parked at the feed store and pretended not to see. Betty at the diner slid pie across the counter when the month had 31 days and my wallet had 28. Dr. Singh's nurse, who could not be bullied by a man like me, reminded me to get the boys their boosters and patted my forearm like she thought maybe I'd earned it. The school learned us, too. Mr. Nash, the principal, kept Daniel after practice once a week, said the words leadership skills and meant them. He let Noah put his paintings in the front hall during open house, even when the theme was community helpers, and Noah brought in a watercolor of a fox staring down a floodlight. "We'll call it a metaphor," Mr. Nash said, and the parents who pretended not to feel things nodded and moved on. It wasn't perfect. Noah flinched when he heard a certain kind of car door slam. Daniel smelled the difference between a person who's had a beer at a ball game and a person who wears liquor like perfume. I learned how to keep my voice low when someone deserved shouting, and how to stand in a doorway without blocking the light. I learned that mercy and boundaries can live in the same house if you split the chores right. We didn't say Rachel's name much. It lived in the walls like a sound you hear only when you're up too late. When the questions came, they came sideways. "Granddad, were you scared?" Noah asked me once, in the kind of voice children use when they're testing the ice with their toe. "I wasn't brave enough to be scared," I said. "I was busy." Daniel didn't ask questions. He checked the windows twice at night and kept Noah's sketchbook out of the dog's reach and learned how to make a grilled cheese without setting the smoke alarm into a panic. He carried his anger like a toolbox, heavy, useful, and not for show. There's a responsible kind of fury. If you've ever met it, you know it. We made traditions, because traditions outlast moods. Saturday mornings we fixed what was fixable. The porch screen that summer storms insisted on disrespecting. The chicken coop latch that did not care about logic. The section of fence that leaned toward the road like it wanted to see who passed by. Sunday afternoons we drove to the creek, skipped stones, and let quiet do the talking. On the drive home, the boys would fall asleep in the back seat with the seatbelts cutting neat lines across their chests. And for a mile, I'd let the world be simple. I wrote our life down in a notebook that doesn't look like anything a judge would care about. It has grease on the cover and a doodle of a tractor that Noah drew when he was trying out triangles. Inside are lines like D curveball landed sweet. 7 to 12 and N sketch of Alma's cat implies grudge. There's a page about the time the power went out and we ate chili by candlelight, and read a book out loud about a man who couldn't keep rabbits out of his fence. Beside it I wrote, "We will learn from this man and build a better fence." Also, buy more beans. You might think I'm sentimental. Maybe I am. But I have learned that the court of memory is the only court that always gets jurisdiction, and it remembers the little things. The night after Rachel's car returned to my gravel, I stood in the kitchen with the old envelope in my hand. It was thin from being folded and unfolded, the way you handle something that weighs more than paper should. Her handwriting ran just a bit to the right, the way a person leans into a hard decision. "Edward, I can't be the mother they deserve. Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't. They're yours now." I put it back in its place and washed my hands so the grease from the day wouldn't make the ink any thinner. Then I sat at the table and looked at the house like a man might look at his own heartbeat, half surprised it's still going, half proud it keeps its own time. Daniel came in, tossed me his baseball cap, and opened the fridge like it owed him answers. He poured milk into a glass that didn't ask permission and said, "Coach thinks I can make varsity if I keep the curve low." "You keep it honest," I said. Which is what I know how to say better than I know how to talk about spin rate. Noah drifted in, fingers stained with a stripe of blue paint that had ambitions of becoming a river. He held up a new drawing of the farmhouse, same sky, same 3 figures, but this time he'd drawn a 4th outline off to the side. Faint, almost not there. "Who's that?" I asked, gentle, like a man approaches a skittish horse. He shrugged. "Just practicing shapes. That's what we were all doing, whether we admitted it or not, practicing the shape of a future we didn't choose. When the boys went to bed, I did the thing I've done every night since they were small and the bad dreams were bigger. I stood between their doors, laid a hand on each frame, and listened. Daniel's room sounded like steady breathing and a thud-thud courtesy of a baseball hitting a glove. Noah's sounded like pencil on paper, even after lights out, because some lines insist on being pulled from the dark. Our life wasn't perfect. It was better. It was ours. It had the kind of order you can only earn by keeping at it. It had witnesses, neighbors with stiff backs and soft hands, a school that puts your kid's picture in the hallway, a doctor who knows which boy hates the scale and which one tries to stand taller to cheat it. So when Rachel came back and said, "My children," in a voice that tried to turn history into a suggestion, I knew what I was defending. Not just custody, not just a house with a mortgage that groaned in February. I was defending the routine that gave two boys a spine, the community that put its name behind our ordinary, the kind of love that counts as work on a timesheet God probably keeps in a drawer I'm not allowed to open yet. I rinsed the cups, turned off the kitchen light, and let the hall lamp do its job. Small circle of yellow that says, "We live here. If tomorrow brings a fight, it can find us steady, because that's the life we built in her absence." And steady is a hard thing to uproot. When Rachel's car disappeared down the road that first day, I thought maybe she'd vanish again like before. A bad dream that leaves a taste in your mouth, but nothing you can hold. I should have known better. 3 days later, the postman didn't even use the box. He walked the envelope to my door. Thick packet, certified. My signature scrawled across the receipt looked like a plow line after too much rain. Inside, petition for custody modification. Words that only lawyers use to turn a heart into evidence. Unlawful detention. Custodial interference. Best interests of the child. Each phrase was like a nail driven into the kitchen table as I read. 8 years of midnight fevers, school lunches, scraped knees, broken bones, bedtime prayers, turned into accusations on cream-colored paper. At 3 p.m. sharp, the phone rang. She had timed it like you time a roast. "Edward," Rachel said, business voice, perfume even through the line. "We can settle this quietly. $500,000 wired to me by Friday, or I take them through court." Her voice never shook. I swallowed slow. "Where were you when Daniel broke his arm sliding into home? Where were you when Noah coughed so hard they hooked him to a machine just to keep his lungs honest?" "I was sick," she said, flat, "but I'm better now." 48 hours, Edward. Then we do it the hard way." She hung up. That night I pulled the old envelope from my church jacket. The letter. Her handwriting slanted like a tired spine. "Edward, I can't be the mother they deserve. Take them. They're yours now. For 8 years, I'd kept it folded like a talisman. Not for revenge, not even for proof. Just because I knew someday the truth would need a body, I didn't sleep. I made a list on a yellow pad instead. School records, doctor's files, photos, witnesses, the letter. By morning, I was sitting in front of a door 2 flights up. Frosted glass with plain black letters, C. Hayes. Attorney at law Clara Hayes. Wasn't flashy. Hair pulled back, eyes practical. No velvet in her handshake, just presence. "Mr. Miller," she said. "Edward," I corrected. She didn't waste time with sympathy as decoration. She asked for facts. I gave her 8 years of them. Birthdays, broken bones, attendance sheets, field trips. Nights when Rachel came drunk to the porch and I had to bar the door so the boys could sleep. When I slid the letter across, she put on gloves and handled it like it was both ordinary paper and a live wire. "This," she said, tapping the bottom where the ink had bled through, "is not just a letter. This is history." Her voice was calm, but her eyes, those eyes told me we had a weapon. I'd faced broken tractors, winter ice storms, and a doctor saying the word terminal with a clipboard in his hand. None of that rattled me the way telling my grandsons about their mother did. That night, after dinner, after homework spread across the kitchen table like a battlefield of math sheets and paint smudges, I clicked the TV off. Daniel froze mid-laugh. Noah looked up, pencil dangling. "Fellas," I said, trying to make my voice kind. "Your mother's come back." The silence was thick. I could hear the tick of the clock, the settling of the house, my own breathing. Daniel's jaw tightened, his shoulders pulled in like he'd been bracing for this day. "She left," he said. His voice cracked like a bat against a ball. "She was hurting," I told him, "because mercy costs nothing and truth often costs more. But she wants to talk to you." Noah's mouth opened, then closed again. His fingers worried the pencil down to a nub. "Can we see her, but still stay here?" My chest ached. "That's what I'll fight for," I said. But I need you to know. There may be meetings, papers, judges, people asking you questions. What you want matters. 2 days later, we were in a beige room at the community center. Beige walls, beige chairs, a box of tissues placed exactly where people might need them. Clara sat at my side, pen poised. A counselor named Mara sat in the corner with a soft gaze and a stopwatch. At 11 on the dot, Rachel walked in. No perfume, no jewelry. A cardigan that looked borrowed. She carried something small in her palm, a sobriety chip. 2 years. Hello, Daniel. Hello, Noah. She said their names like she expected them to pour out into her hands. Daniel's hello was polite but colder than a January fence post. Noah just nodded, sketchbook open on his lap. Rachel placed the coin on the table. I've been sober 731 days, plus 1. I count them. Neither boy reached for it. Then she slid 2 tins across, small, dented boxes. These are for you. Photos, things I kept. Daniel opened his. A picture of himself in a pumpkin costume, barely 2 years old, cheeks round with a grin he no longer trusted. Noah's box held a hospital bracelet, a single baby sock, and a photo of the 3 of them on a blanket. He stared at the bracelet like it might start beeping. I know I left, Rachel said. Her voice wavered. I was sick. Not a cold, a different kind. I made terrible choices. I'm seeing a counselor now. I have a job. An apartment. I don't expect you to forget. I just want to start small. Daniel lifted his head, eyes sharp. You didn't leave a note. Not for us. Her lips trembled. The worst things I've ever done come from the words should have, she whispered. Noah turned his sketchbook so she could see. He had drawn the table, 4 circles around it. 3 were shaded dark and solid. Hers was only a faint outline. Rachel stared at it a long moment. It's okay if mine stays light for a while, she said softly. The counselor's timer buzzed. 30 minutes gone, Rachel stood. Thank you for seeing me, she said. She didn't reach for them, and that mattered. She gathered her things, and with a last look, left the room. Daniel exhaled sharp through his nose, as though he'd been holding his breath the entire time. We did it, he muttered. Noah whispered almost to himself. She remembered the dog from the fair. The 3-legged one, tripod. I put a hand on each of their shoulders. Your choice matters more than anyone else's, I said. And I meant it. When you've lived long enough, you learn that truth doesn't just live in your own mouth. It lives in the people who've been watching all along. After that first supervised visit, Clara told me, we need more than your word, Edward. Judges want steady voices, paper trails, people who've seen with their own eyes. So I went to gather my army. Not soldiers with rifles, neighbors with memories, teachers with charts, a diner owner with a pen, and a cop who knows the sound of a false alarm when he hears it. Alma, the neighbor. She opened the door with the chain still on. When she saw me, she undid it, house smelling like fresh bread. Come in, dear, she said. I told her what I needed. Her hands tightened on her apron. Those boys are yours in everything but blood, she said. I've seen you in snow and fever. I've seen you haul Noah to urgent care during that ice storm. I'll put it all down in writing, clear and firm. Betty, the diner owner. Betty didn't even let me finish before she reached for her best pen. She'd been there that afternoon when Rachel slid into the booth and told me $500,000 or else. I heard every word she said, Betty told me. And I'll swear to it under oath. That woman didn't sound like a mother. She sounded like a hustler. Officer Barnes, he showed up at my porch one morning, hat in his hand, cruiser idling like a watchdog. Grant, he said, he always gets my name wrong, but I never correct him. We got a call last night. Anonymous tip claiming minors in your house were being alienated from their mother. I've seen these games before. Custody fights bring out prank calls like weeds. He tapped the brim of his hat. Don't worry. I'll write it clean for the judge. And I'll make sure the patrol car swings by more often, just in case. Mr. Nash, the school principal, he sat me down in his office with a poster of a bald eagle behind him. Daniel's a leader, he said. The kind of boy others follow without resenting it. Noah's an artist, sharp as a tack, but he turns his math in on time. They're thriving here, Edward. Steady, that's on you. He printed out attendance charts, grade summaries, discipline records, solid, boring paper that judges love. Signed every page in ink that looked proud to be used. Dr. Singh, the pediatrician. She pressed a hand to my arm after handing over the boys' medical summaries. "They're healthy, attached and cared for," she said. Then she looked me in the eye the way a person does when she's seen you in waiting rooms you never wanted to be in. That's both clinical and human. By the end of that week, my kitchen table looked like a fortress. Stacks of affidavits, records, testimony, pages dull to the outside eye, but to me, each was a log on the fire. Proof that 8 years of breakfasts, doctor visits, and parent-teacher conferences weren't just memories. They were evidence. When Clara flipped through the folder, she nodded once. "Judges like this kind of boring," she said. "This is how we win." I thought about Rachel's polished smile, her lawyer in his slick city suit, her talk of sobriety chips and second chances. Let her have her speeches. I had affidavits and attendance charts, and I had a town that had been watching all along. I've stood in barns with the roof caving in storms that shook the ground under my boots. But nothing rattled me like stepping into that courthouse. It smelled of floor polish and paper. Long hallway, ceilings too high for comfort. At the end of it, the double doors to family court swung open like the mouth of something that swallows you whole. The boys weren't there. Thank God. They'd been spared this part. Just me, Clara Hayes, and a stack of folders that looked ordinary but felt heavier than anvils. Rachel sat on the other side, blazer-pressed, hair tied neat. At her table, a man in a grey suit I'd never seen before, her lawyer. He had the kind of voice that thinks it can turn lies into music. Judge Holt entered, black robe swishing, face unreadable. We stood, then sat, and the gavel cracked like thunder over wood. Rachel sighed. Her lawyer painted a picture. Rachel, sober for 2 years, steady job as a receptionist. Neat apartment, active in recovery groups. He held up her sobriety chips, placed them on the evidence table like jewels. "Your Honor," he said, "every parent deserves the right to rehabilitate. Mrs. Carter is no longer the broken woman she once was. She is stable, consistent, and fully capable of reuniting with her sons. To deny her is to deny redemption itself." Rachel dabbed her eyes with a tissue at just the right moments. She looked fragile, remade, the kind of woman juries and judges are taught to pity. Her counselor testified about progress. A co-worker swore she never missed a shift. Even the landlord wrote a note. Rent paid on time. It sounded neat, polished, too polished, our side. Clara stood, calm as stone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Your Honor, we're not here to argue whether Mrs. Carter has made progress in her personal life. We commend that. We're here to decide what's best for Daniel and Noah, and for 8 years. That's been Mr. Edward Miller." She called Alma. The neighbor spoke about winters, emergency trips, small mercies that looked ordinary until you counted them up. She called Betty. Betty testified about the diner booth, about Rachel's $500,000 demand. "I was there," she said firmly. "I heard her." Word for word. Officer Barnes took the stand next. He explained the anonymous calls, the false complaints, the nights he drove past to keep the house safe. The school principal brought records. Dr. Singh, the pediatrician, testified. Healthy, bonded, thriving. "Those boys are safe where they are." Each voice stacked on the next until the judge's table looked like the foundation of a wall. The letter. Finally, Clara reached for the envelope. Worn, yellowed, the ink still steady. "Your Honor," she said, "this is in Mrs. Carter's own hand, dated the night she left. Authenticated by handwriting analysis." She read it aloud. The words echoed in that courtroom the way a bell echoes across empty hills. "Edward, I can't be the mother they deserve. Take them, raise them, love them the way I can't." Silence. You could hear the hum of the air vents, the shuffle of someone's shoe on linoleum. Rachel's face crumpled. For the first time that day, her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Judge Holt turned to her. "Mrs. Carter, did you write this letter?" Rachel's lips trembled. "Yes, I wrote it. I was sober when I did. I knew what I was saying." Her voice cracked like glass underfoot. "But I've changed." Cross-examination. Clara leaned forward, her voice precise. "Mrs. Carter, you don't deny abandoning your children, correct?" Rachel closed her eyes. No, you don't deny entrusting them to Mr. Miller in writing. I don't. And for 8 years while he raised them, you made no financial contribution. No visits, no cards, no birthdays. Rachel shook her head, tears slipping. Thank you. No further questions. By then, the judge's pen had filled 3 pages. He tapped it once on the bench, eyes weighing not just the words, but the years behind them. I sat there, hands folded, thinking of Daniel's curveball and Noah's faintly drawn 4th figure in his sketch. Thinking of the lunches, the late-night fevers, the way love teaches you routines nobody claps for. For the first time since this began, I felt something steady rise in me. Not anger, not even fear, just truth, standing taller than both. The gavel cracked again. We'll recess for judgment, and I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. When we filed back into the courtroom after recess, I swear the air was thicker. Like the walls themselves knew they were about to carry the weight of something that mattered. Judge Holt sat higher than the rest of us, robe dark against the pale wood. He shuffled his notes, cleared his throat, and for a long moment looked at Rachel. Then at me. His voice carried no music, just the flat truth of the law. This is not an easy case, he began. The court recognizes Mrs. Carter's 2 years of sobriety, her stable employment, and the steps she has taken toward rebuilding her life. These efforts are commendable, but this court's mandate is clear. The best interests of the children must prevail. Rachel's hands were clasped white in her lap. Her lawyer leaned forward, ready to spring. The judge's eyes moved to me. For 8 years, Mr. Miller has provided a stable, loving, and consistent environment for Daniel and Noah Miller. All testimony and records confirm that the boys are thriving under his care. To uproot them now would cause unnecessary harm and disruption. Rachel's shoulders dropped. A tear rolled down, quick as if it had been waiting. Therefore, Judge Holt said firmly, the petition for custody modification is denied. Legal and physical custody shall remain with Mr. Miller. However, and here he paused, supervised visitation with Mrs. Carter may continue, with gradual review depending on the boy's adjustment and wishes. This court encourages continued recovery and relationship building, but it will not sacrifice stability in pursuit of speculation. The gavel struck. Sharp, final. I didn't move at first. My hands were steady on the table, but my heart was hammering so hard I thought maybe the sound had been audible. Clara gave me a small nod, the kind you give a man who already knew the answer but needed to hear it said aloud. Rachel stood slowly, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She didn't storm, didn't rage. She just looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a flicker of a second, our eyes met. I didn't see a villain. I saw a woman who'd built a fire too late for the winter she abandoned. The bailiff opened the doors. People filed out, murmurs mixing with the squeak of shoes on polished floors. I walked slower, letting the weight of the decision settle in my bones. Outside, the sun hit my face, bright, unapologetic. I pulled out my phone, dialed home. Daniel answered. Well? His voice sharp, guarded. You're staying, I said simply. I heard him exhale, like he'd been carrying bricks in his lungs. Noah's voice piped up in the background. Told you, Danny. Told you! My throat caught, but I pushed through it. We'll talk more tonight. I'll bring pie. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from release. Justice isn't fireworks. It's the quiet slam of a gavel. The knowledge that what you've carried isn't going to be taken away by paper or polished words. And sometimes, it's enough. That night, after the courthouse dust had settled, I pulled into the gravel drive and sat in the truck a minute longer than usual. The house stood the way it always did. Porch light on, curtains uneven where Noah had tugged them last, baseball glove abandoned on the steps, ordinary, and yet it felt like the most sacred place on earth. Inside, the boys were waiting. Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, trying to look casual, but his eyes gave him away, bright, searching. Noah sat at the table, sketchbook open, pencil smudges on his fingers. Well, Daniel asked. You're staying, I told them, voice steady. Noah whooped, throwing his arms in the air, nearly knocking over his glass of milk. Daniel let out a long breath, then gave a single nod. Not dramatic, Just relief. The kind a young man carries in silence. We had pie, courtesy of Betty, who sent it home with me after court. Cherry still warm. We ate it with forks, straight from the tin. No ceremony, just 3 people chewing through victory and exhaustion at the same time. Later, as the boys got ready for bed, Noah brought me his sketchbook. This time the farmhouse drawing had 4 figures in the yard. 3 of them shaded solid, me, Daniel himself. The 4th was faint but present, a softer outline standing just behind. She's still out there, he said quietly. But not in here. Not yet. I put my hand on his shoulder. That's all right. Some doors don't open all the way at once. When the house grew quiet, I stood in the hallway like I always do, one hand on each boy's doorframe. Daniel's room echoed with the soft pop of a baseball glove catching and releasing. Noah's had the scratch of pencil on paper, even after lights out. The same sounds I'd been listening to for 8 years. The sounds of home. I thought about Matthew, my son, their father. The promise I made at his hospital bed, I'll keep them safe. That night, I knew I had kept it. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but faithfully. I walked to the mantel and looked at the photograph. Matthew holding Daniel as a baby, Rachel in the corner of the frame, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. I set the court papers down beside it. Proof that love is louder than absence, heavier than law. You want to know what justice feels like? It doesn't roar. It doesn't strut. It just sits at your kitchen table with you, tired and quiet, sharing cherry pie out of a tin while your grandsons laugh down the hall. That's the kind of justice a man can live with, because in the end, revenge wasn't about destroying Rachel. It was about protecting what she tried to throw away. It was about proving that love, stubborn, ordinary, everyday love, was the truest kind of custody. And if there's one thing I know for certain, it's this. Home isn't defined by blood, or by courts, or by second chances promised too late. Home is where the boys fall asleep and dream without fear, and that's exactly where they stayed.